So this is module 2, where I just give an overview of the different property strategies. There's so many different property strategies that might depend, or which one you choose might depend on your expertise, the availability of finance, the amount of free time, your own personal preference, your location and so on. So I'll just give an overview of different sorts. Now the passive buy and hold system is, well, particularly good for relative beginners who don't have much expertise, especially if there's a rising market. So let's get going. So general principles when you decide on a strategy. I think it's really important. You want to maximize your return on investment, obviously. But I think it's also, you shouldn't just focus on that. You should also, if it's simple, that's obviously really good. Then you don't have to go on lots of training courses or hire experts in or other people to do stuff. You also want it to be passive, probably. You don't want it to eat into a lot of your time. You also want it to be low risk. Some strategies are a lot more risky than others, e.g. Big developments or conversions or something like that. Also, you want it to be relatively stress-free. A lot of people can get very stressed out over property, especially managing. If they have difficult tenants, it can be very stressful. So, but in an ideal world, we're looking for a strategy with high return, simple, passive, and low risk, and stress-free. So I'll just run through a few different strategies here. The strategies I'm going to talk about now are flipping, HMOs, deal sourcing, buy and hold long term. So starting with flipping, just talking about the pros and cons. Well, there's really only one pro, which is a big pro, it's not bad. That if you buy significantly below market value, or you can add value by fixing a problem, then you can get a good return quickly. So maybe you find an amazing deal, someone needs to sell really quickly for some reason, or maybe they're selling, maybe it's unmortgageable, maybe they're selling it and they don't have a kitchen or something like that, so the buyers can't get a mortgage out of it. So if you're in a position to buy it, put a kitchen in, so then it becomes mortgageable, you can sell it at a higher amount. Now with bridging, because you're in and out relatively quickly, buy it and then sell it, maybe a few months later, maybe at least say in the following 6 months, bridging finance is more expensive than buy-to-let finance, but it's perfect for this sort of scenario, especially if it's unmortgageable. So you can make quick cash flipping, people do it, and even better if there's a rising market. Sometimes if you get it in a hot spot where in that 6-month period property prices go up 5%, 10%, which does occasionally happen, you can do very well with flipping. There are some cons. There are lots of people trying to do the same thing, so it's not that easy to get this dream property that you can then just go out and sell at 25% higher value next month. So you can involve a lot of time finding a good property, or maybe you're fixing it or renovating it in some way, which can be problematic or stressful dealing with builders. So it's not necessarily easy, and it could be risky. Maybe there is a slowdown in the property market. Maybe you made a mistake, or maybe, there's all sorts of things that can potentially go wrong. And because, there are buying costs and also selling costs, as a rule of thumb, I'd say the buying costs and selling costs are about 10% of the property value. So if you buy a property for 300,000, on average, if you buy it and sell it, including all the time you have to pay the mortgage interest while you're waiting for someone to buy it, you might have to do it up, clean it, all the legal fees and so on. Approximately, as a rule of thumb, I'd say these add up to about 10% of the value which is quite significant. So, and also there's your time as well. So you've got to be quite know what you're doing to make good money out of this, considering the costs. These eat into your profit, and it does require a bit of expertise. You do have to know what you're doing to do this. So HMOs, houses of multiple occupation, used to be called bedsits. Now these can be really good, and there's different sorts of HMOs. There's the sort of luxury boutique style ones, or there's ones where you have a load of people on benefits from, or so, and each have their own pros and cons. But let's go to the advantages first. The rental return can be much higher because it's one house that you'd normally rent out as a single let. You might get, say, £1,000 a month from it, but if you rent it out by room, maybe there's 4 different rooms you could rent out to different people. Maybe you could rent each room out at, say, £500 each. So maybe you could get then £2,000 a month doing this. So you could get a lot more rental income for the same property. So, which is great because this gives you much higher cash flow. So that is a massive advantage. Another potential advantage is that it's financed differently. It's not done through a normal buy-to-let mortgage, which has pros and cons, but it means that when they lend you the value of the when they lend you money, the lender, instead of doing it on the bricks and mortar value of the property, sometimes they will see it more as a business. Like when a company goes to a lender and asks for money, the company itself has no inherent value. It's maybe just a couple of share certificates. But what it does represent is an income stream. So the lender will look at the income stream of the property and value according to that, and lend money according to that. So depending on your exact location and so on, this income stream, this rental income stream, could be quite high compared to what you actually spend. So the lender might actually think, oh, this is worth more than you actually spent on it. So you might end up occasionally getting a mortgage of more than 100% of what you paid for it. You probably won't be that lucky, but it might well be, say, higher than the 75% that you'd normally get on a buy-to-let mortgage. So if it's more than 100% of what you pay for it, that's called, then you cash out and you put down your deposit, and then you get the commercial loan organised, and you end up with more money than you actually spent, which is wonderful because you've got cash then, and then you get cash every month. But this is the holy grail, and to get that you'd have to buy in a certain area like the Midlands or up north or something like that, where the rental returns are much higher, which might mean you have to get someone else to manage it for you. So it's a bit harder. But in any case, there are sometimes advantages of getting commercial loans, which I'll go into in other modules. There are, however, some disadvantages of HMOs. Often you will have to refurbish it. Certainly you have to comply with fire regulations and so on. Sometimes you have to put in a fire alarm. Sometimes to rent it out, you might rent it out more easily if you put in ensuite showers and toilets in every room. And so you might have to deal a lot with builders, which can be a bit of a nightmare, because I've dealt a lot with builders. Sometimes it's gone quite smoothly, but sometimes there are problems, and then they want to somehow increase the budget or increase the time. They go and work on another job and then they're late. So you have to control that, which does take a bit of skill and expertise, and if you've never dealt with builders before, you could face more problems, and it can be a bit stressful as well. So that is a downside. tenants can be a lot more trouble. Now, if you get a sort of upmarket one in the city with good quality professional tenants, you'll have less trouble. But a lot of these HMOs, maybe people are more transient, maybe they are from abroad just working here for a few months, or maybe they are on benefits and so on, and you can run into problems. Maybe they fall out with each other, maybe they stop paying rent, maybe they vandalise the property. There's all sorts of potential problems you can have, which can eat into your time, can be quite stressful and can cost you money. So there are lots of rules that the local council give. For instance, I know that each council is different, but that they have certain guidelines, like room cannot be below this number of square meters. So you might have to move a partition, or maybe one room you can't actually rent out as a room. You have to just have that as a communal area or something like that. And you can have to you sometimes have to spend a lot of time understanding these rules, which can it can take a lot of your time and be very boring. And if you don't comply with the rule, you could end up with in trouble. And you also have to register them as well, the council. And I think some councils, especially in London, are much more onerous in the demands they make of you. So it does require a lot of training and expertise, and you have to be good at dealing with builders and compliance and difficult tenants. And sometimes it's hard to find tenants. And now this can be, if the HMO is quite near you, it's obviously a lot easier because you can control this yourself. But if it's the other part of the country, then you're reliant on local agents and so on. And some agents are not very good with HMOs. I've phoned up agents in another part of the country, and I've talked about renting out to HMOs, and they said, "Oh, no, will not manage an HMO for you. So it's too difficult. We've had too many problems." Or other ones will say, "Yes, we can, but we do. You might get a lot of voids, which will obviously eat into your profit a lot." So. Also, the exit strategy can be hard because you might have bought a property, spent a lot of money refurbing it, turning it into an HMO. Then if you sell it, if you want to sell it a few years later, you can't just sell it as a normal residential property, because it might have all these bathrooms in and stuff that a normal person buying a family home would not want. So the only other people who could sell it to are normal HMO investors, and these are few and far between. And especially if you don't have a good proven track record of high rental income, then it's particularly hard to sell. So that is a downside of HMOs. It can be hard to get your money back if you want to sell, if you need your money back quickly. And so, because estate agents are not very good at managing this, you might end up having to manage it yourself, which can be quite stressful. So, deal sourcing is another way of making money. Pros and cons. So this is where you maybe you're quite good at finding deals, but you don't have the money to invest in it yourself. So you find a great deal, and then you find an investor who's got lots of money, who wants a great deal, and then you tell the investor, "Okay, we can have this deal if you buy this property and just pay me a few £1,000s." So you've just earned a few £1,000s for that. So in theory this can work. It does work. People do quite well out of it, but there's also cons. So let's go into this. So a big advantage, it doesn't require any cash outlay. So if you're totally broke, you can still make money this way. You just find a great deal, find an investor, put the two together and get your cut. It's also fairly risk-free. I mean, there's not really anything that can go wrong. There are disadvantages though. It can take a lot of time to find good below market value deals. And also it takes expertise as well. Also, it works better in some parts of the country than others. If you're in London, rental returns are a lot lower. So a lot of people in London and the South East are looking for high rental returns. So they might want a property, say, in the Midlands or the North. But if you live in London, it's a bit harder to do deal sourcing. So it could work better if you live in one of those areas with high rental returns. And so it does need a bit of expertise, both in terms of getting the deal and also in terms of getting the investor, and also knowing how to sort of structure things and deal with the paperwork and so on. So now this is probably my favourite strategy especially for beginners or people who don't want to spend a lot of time or stress doing this, which is buy and hold long term. Pros: it's very simple. You just buy property, rent it out, wait. That's all you have to do. Safe, as long as you get a high rental return that covers your mortgage interest and gives you enough buffer for interest rate rises and voids and so on. And you've got a good agent. There's not that much that can go horribly wrong with it in the longer term. It's passive, done through a good letting agent. Now, and if you never ever sell, if you just keep it for the rest of your life, you will have to pay tax on your rental income, but you'll never pay capital gains tax. And if you just draw down money, draw down equity every now and again. So it's always good to avoid tax. There are some cons though. It does tie up your cash or your JV partners or investors' cash as a deposit. And if you keep it for the long term, it ties up their cash for the long term, at least until it goes up enough so you can draw down all the equity that you put into it. So you have to wait till the price of property increases till you can refinance. So in a rising market, you might only have to wait a year or two, but if there's a slump or plateau, you can wait a lot longer. In some areas, the rental cash flow can be low, e.g. London. Rental cash flow is quite low. That's rental return rent divided by the price of the property. And in some types of property, rental cash flow is even lower. So in large properties like 3 or 4 bedroom, you tend to get a lower rental return than if it's, say, a 1 or 2 bedroom unit. So the summary of the sort of the buy-to-let passive system, which I'll probably recommend for beginners, depending on what sort of market we're in and what sort of we expect to happen to property prices going forward in the next few years. But this system would be so as much as you can get below market value from motivated sellers, because if you get it, say 10 or 20% below market value, it means that when you come to refinance in say a couple of years' time, you're much more likely to be able to draw down most or all of your deposit, and by doing that, that dramatically increases your return on this investment. You can get good cash flow from this. IRR, internal rate of return, is the best, most exact method of calculating this, which I'll go into in future modules. So keep it simple, stupid, KISS. Single lets are very simple, and if you avoid big refurbs, also quite simple. So this is what I try and do. I don't want to spend a lot of my time managing or developing a lot of expertise in certain things. And also, so keep it passive with none of your time spent on it. Keep it low risk as much as you can. So I wouldn't recommend, some people like to get 90% mortgages and things like that. I think that's a bit risky. I think if you keep it at 75% mortgage, even if property prices go down 25%, which is very rare, but it could happen, then at least you know that you're not in negative equity then. The equity would still be equal to your mortgage, so you could sell it off and pay your mortgage back. And also 75% loan to value mortgages are, you'll find there's less fees you have to pay to the mortgage lender. So normally they're a lot cheaper. So they're the ones I'd recommend. And I'd also recommend you have a 6-month emergency fund. Things can go wrong. So just in general, in life in general, I think it's always good to have 6 months emergency fund. Maybe you'll fall ill. But if you don't have that fund and then things go wrong, you're totally stuffed. But as long as but I think when things go wrong, if you know that, I've got 6 months to sort it out, you normally should be able to sort things out within 6 months. So obviously, if you're more risk adverse, you could have longer periods, emergency fund, say a year or 2 years.